Right, in this exercise, we will understand how to set up prerequisites for setting up Vue Horizon 7.10 environment. First, let's understand how the lab is being set up. So the lab requires, the environment requires an AD environment, requires an VMware vSphere environment, and third requires an SQL Server 2012 or 2 and above. So we prepared an environment, an AD domain, ALVHN.net. So I'm going to perform all the operations using ALVHN/administrator account. So we're using a couple of servers to set up this environment, and we require an Windows Server 2016 for Vue Horizon application or 7.10 application purpose. So total we are using 2 servers initially. So ALVHN srv01.alvhn.net, so which we are going to use Vue connection server, or if you can say Horizon connection server. Then we are using ALVHN srv02.alvhn.net. We're going to use for Horizon replica server. So we have set up an AD, ALVHN AD srv.alvhn.net, and the IP address of this machine is 192.168.72.10. So if the AD is configured with basic and default AD domain services. So you can refer any of the AD implementation documentation. Just for this, we need in one forest with one domain, a forest with a domain, and all these machines, the SQL Server and the Vue Horizon environment should be part of the AD environment. So we have VMware vSphere environment, one AL VHN SR VHN vCenter.alvhn.net 192.168.72.11. So this is where VMware vCenter 6.0 installed, and we have ALVHN ESXi 01.alvhn.net 192.168.72.13, and this is a VMware vSphere ESXi 6.0 version. And we have another ESXi server, AL vHN.net 192.168.72.14, and this is again a VMware vSphere ESXi 6.0. So the vCenter is installed on a Windows machine, a Windows server. So we have a SQL server installed on ALVHN SRV03.ALVHN.net 192.168.72.17. This is a SQL server. Okay. 2012 R2 installed. We already installed the VMware vSphere vCenter environment, and we already deployed the ESXi server and kept it ready. And we added this server into domain, and we already installed a SQL server with ALVHN/administrator account, enabled mixed mode authentication, and added user ALVHN/administrator as a DB admin or a super admin in SQL application. So during the deployment of that SQL server, you can add the user as DB admin or a super admin in SQL application. So we have AD server, and AD server. So I'll be keep referring this particular document, .72.10. So this server is playing a roles of an AD domain controller, AD certificate services, and DSCP server. And we have AL, so vCenter server 72.11, 68.72.11. This is vCenter server application. And we have ALVHN ESXi01.ALVHN.net 192.168.72.13. 02.LHN, which is 14. So which will be managed using the vCenter. So we have SQL Server, which is installed in 192.168.72.17. So SQL Server application is being installed, and we are going to use connection server 192.168.72.15. And we are going to use replica server 192.168.72.16. So these two servers where we're going to deploy the Horizon 7.1.0. So I'm just saving this diagram. Horizon 7.10 setup. Horizon 7.10 setup. So what we'll do is now as an initial step. So we'll deploy the AD certificate services, then DHCP server. We'll set up the AD certificate services. So log on to AD server. So I'm using an AD server. Open server manager. Add roles and features. Select the server. Select Active Directory Certificate Services. Click on Next, Next, Next. In the role services, select the certification authority, policy environment, web service, web enrollment, and online responder. Online responder. Click on Next and install. So wait for the installation to complete. Right. Now the installation is completed. Now we have to configure it. Go to the settings, configure Active Directory Certificate Services. Select the ALVHN user account. Select first certification authority. Enterprise CA. Root CA. So we are going to make the AD server as an internal CA. Private certificate. The key length. The rest all you select the default. Common name you can give it. I'm just leaving it. The defaults. Certificate expiry time. Just click on configure. With all the default selections, you can configure it. Close it. It will prompt you to configure additional role services. Click on S. Select web role environment As we enable certain features of the certificate services, we need to configure all. Configure additional role services. Select online responder. Configure. Certificate enrollment services. Next. Next. Select use a built-in application pool identity. Configure. Additional services. Select policy web service. Configure. So we did. So we log into the AD server. We added AD certificate services role. Then we configured AD certificate services. So let's deploy and configure DSCP role. Log on to AD server. Install DSCP feature. Then configure DSCP service. So I'm going to the AD server, add roles and features. So I'm selecting the DSCP server. Right. So the installation is completed. Let's configure it. DSCP configure it. So I'm selecting the default administrator account. Commit. Close. Now let's go to the DSCP server. Let's create a scope. Okay. So let's create a scope. So I'm saying a new scope. I'm saying acute view horizon. Starting IP address, I'm giving 192.168.72.200. Ending IP address, I'm giving 72.240. So I'm having 40 IP addresses. Length. Do you want to configure a scope or scope? Sorry. Back. I'm creating a release period. I'm giving it only 3 hours. Yes, want to configure these options now. Provide the gateway 19.168.72.12. whatever based in your environment, you provide your default gateway, the domain name, the DNS server, which is your AD server. We don't have any events. Activate the scope. Say finish. So when we deploy the so let me check. Pool 70.200 to 70.254. I gave an IP address releases, and as of now nothing has been configured over there of it. Right. Now I'm just closing it. Third step will enable FIPS. Log on to AD server, open group policy, then enable FIPS cryptography on the domain group policy. So I'm going to the AD server, group policy management. You can create a new group policy or you can use the existing one. I'm just using the existing one. Go to the computer policies, Windows settings, security settings, local policies, security options. Open the default domain policy. Go to the computer configuration, enter that policies, enter that Windows settings, enter that security settings, enter that local policies, enter that security options. So look for a policy. We can see here, system cryptography, use FIPS compliant algorithms for encryption purpose. Click on that, enable it, say apply, say OK. Right. So we have set up the AD environment. So these are the three things which we have to take care at the AD level for the view horizon environment. Later point of time, we will see that what is required in AD. So I'm just saving this AD prerequisites. Now let's go to the SQL Server. So installation is already done. So let's first is an deploy SQL Server with domain credentials, and make sure mixed mode authentication is enabled during the deployment. Third one, so make sure the ALVHN or the administrator account which is used to deploy the horizon environment has DB permissions, DB admin privileges or permissions. So I'm logging into the SQL Server. as already SQL application is installed. Yes. So go open the SQL Server Management Studio. So you should be able to connect to the database. So if you're using an SA account and if it's not enabled mixed mode authentication, so connect with the SA user account, the local user account, go to the properties, select the server, properties, security. So here, if you're not enabled, you have to enable SQL Server in Windows authentication mode. Okay. So make sure that this is being enabled. So if not, then just enable that and reboot it. Go to the security, logins. Make sure that the ALVHN administrator, whatever your domain user account, has the permissions. So we already during the deployment itself we have added, and the roles you can put it as a public and a system admin, the DB system admin. So you should be able to have a system admin privileges on the SQL Server to create it. So what I'm trying to do is I'm creating two databases. So one is an VH events. I'm creating one more database, VH composer. So fourth step, so open SQL Management Studio. So verify mixed mode authentication is enabled. 6. Verify whether the administrator account which is used as sysadmin role. 7th, create two databases, VH events and VH composer. So we did the SQL Server to SQL Server setup or prerequisites. Now let's understand from the vCenter, from VMware vSphere environment. VMware vSphere 6.0 is required. So log on to vCenter server. Open vSphere web client. Log on to vSphere web client using administrator @vsphere.local, which are the user account which have permissions. ALVHN So I'm logging into the vSphere web client. Just let me allow the flash player. So make sure that you have a data center created. In our case, we created HYD. Make sure that you created a cluster ALCLU. Maybe you can enable DRS or HA based on the environment. But in my case, I just created a cluster without any enabling the DRS or HA. See, add 2 ESXi hosts into cluster and make sure there is a shared data store between the 2 ESXi hosts. Say host. Good thing. So ensure or add domain into identity source. Provide, in my case, it is an ALVHN/administrator account. Full permissions on the vCenter. In a production, we don't need a full permissions. We need a permissions to create virtual machines, consume data store. Right. So I'm just logged into the vSphere. Let me go to the host and cluster. So we have HYD data center, ALCLU data center. There are 2 ESXi servers, and there are 3 data stores. Data store 13, which is for ESXi 13, data store 14, which is for ESXi 14, SDS, which is a shared data store between the ESXi server 13 and 14. So either you can use vSphere client or vSphere web client to configure it. So next I'm going to the administration. I'm checking the configuration, identity sources. So here we added the ALVHN.NET into identity source. In case if you have not added, you can click on add and you can specify the Active Directory integrated within the authentication and you can add your domain. So you have to make sure that your AD environment is added as an identity source into the vSphere environment. Then go to the global permissions, manage. So add the administrator. So in my case, I'm using the select the ALVHN administrator. So I'm selecting ALVHN. Now in our case, whatever the user account which you're going to use, so you can select that and make sure that the administrator role is available and click on OK. Now let's check that whether we are able to log in using the domain administrator account. So I'm saying ALVHN/administrator. So now I'm able to log in with the domain administrator account or the user account, which I give permissions, and I'm able to see these things. So make sure that you created a data center cluster and added 2 ESXi servers and these two ES6 servers should have at least one shared data store. So these are the things which we need to set up at a VMware vSphere level. Right. So now, we've finished the setting up the prerequisites and environment for Horizon 1.0 environment.